You're listening to Your Rivers Are Wrong, the podcast. My name is Merle. I'm here with my good friend Dante, and we're here to build worlds and tell their stories. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Hello again, one and all, to the Your Rivers Are Wrong podcast. I'm Dante. I'm one of your hosts for today.
And I'm the other one. My name is Merle.
And we're here to discuss, as we always do, the art and aesthetics of the activity, I guess we would say, the activity of world building and the storytelling that comes of it. Everything that involves itself in that process. How are you doing today, Merle?
I'm pretty good. I did a bunch of walking this week, so I feel very fit, which is good. Or like hiking is, I think, the good word, because walking is just like going from one place to another. They're different as well.
Well, I'm guessing hiking is like elevation, right? It's not hiking if you're just walking on the street, right?
That's fair.
Or is hiking like the difficulty of it? What if you're walking?
If you walk for a long time, I don't feel like it's walking anymore. I feel like it's hiking, even though you don't go up or down.
So wait. If you're walking on like a long dirt road for like hours, do you consider that hiking?
Maybe it's also because then it has to be like a sort of recreational thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's not a recreational thing, it's maybe walking. Like if your car broke, then you're not hiking.
Yeah, I'm thinking like if you're walking on a
complicated.
road. I think there's got to be some aspect of elevation to it, right? Like if you have to be like going up or down to be hiking.
Okay, sure.
Right?
You're the native speaker here.
No. You have the same word in your language. It's not hiking, but there's an equivalent, right? There's got to be.
I mean, I guess so, yeah. We have like but that's funny because our word for like recreational hiking is wandelen, which sounds more like walking than hiking.
Interesting.
But then the word for just using your feet to go somewhere is lopen. And that's walking in English. So that's confusing. So I don't know if that helps. Probably not. Not at all.
I mean, so are you doing this like on the regular? Are you doing this like every day? Or is it like yesterday was just intentionally more difficult than usual?
No, I usually do like the evening walk, right? That we talked about earlier, I think.
Yeah.
So that's been going steady, which is great. But then on Saturday, I did a sort of spontaneous, longer afternoon hike with my roommate friend. So that was fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
You know, what this is reminding me of, literally, like as you're saying, like, oh, I'm getting fit, I'm exercising. Yesterday, one of my coworkers came in and told me, hey, in the shared employee locker, I brought some bars of chocolate from my old workplace that they didn't need because it was expired by like a week. It's still good. Do you want some? And you know what I did?
Talking about getting fit.
It's only like a week, right? That's got to be just fine. Mm-hmm. So I ate some.
Nice.
I didn't immediately regret it.
I would do the same. Like, there's no blame here.
Yeah, but as you talk about like hiking and stuff, I'm like, so what did I do yesterday? I ate some expired chocolate.
I mean, there's days and then there's days, you know. I completely have this too in weeks, so no hard feelings, man. Sometimes you just need some expired chocolate in your system, I guess.
Oh yeah, yesterday was one of those days. Yesterday was like a roller coaster.
Oh dang,
things were happening. Yeah, like there was some people who came, like a small film crew that wanted to record our workplace for like some bigger video for like a trustee board or something like that, like just to see what's going around, what's happening in our workplace. And they're like, oh, by the way, you're volunteered to be interviewed. Best of luck.
Whoa, what? That's not how volunteering works. I would hate that so much if people would do that to me. Oh God, like no pressure and stuff.
Yeah, so I was wholly unprepared, but we got through it. So halfway through the day, I just go to my coworker. I'm just like, today's really been daying. It's been a real daying day.
Yeah,
just one of those.
Makes sense. Yep.
Yeah, nice to know the differences in our experiences. Promise, I won't eat too much more expired chocolate. I may have a bar or two.
You do you. It's all good. This reminds me, by the way, like to maybe balance the scale a bit here. We had like a family holiday at some point, like some time ago, And then we went to Belgium, which is right under the Netherlands. And then there was this super big chocolate factory in the middle of nowhere.
Ooh.
And then they sold like quote unquote scrap chocolate for like €1 for like 3 kilos or something. It was crazy.
3 kilos?
Yeah, it was.
Wait, how much? That's like 7. That's a lot.
That's a lot. Yeah, that's like nothing for a lot of chocolate. So we went there at the beginning of our holiday, and then we finished this entire chocolate, and it was super delicious, of course, because it was like straight from the press. Only they were like a little bit janky or something. I don't even know what was wrong with it because it was fucking beautiful. And then I remember that everyone was like in the car, and we passed the crossroads where you would go right to the factory. And everyone in the car was like, I mean, we're never going to go back here. Shouldn't we, like, just in case, just get a bit of an extra for the road? And everyone was like, yes, this is a great plan. Let's do it. So,
amazing.
The moments are real, and I don't regret it. Yeah.
I love how you're just also casually saying, yeah, we just went to another country just a few days ago. I'm like, what? I can't do that.
Oh, no, not a few days ago. No.
Oh, shoot.
This was like a family holiday in like, I don't know, 2000 and like a bunch of years back.
Okay, cool.
No,
cool.
that would be very casual. No, I wish that was my life, but no.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I do also remember a while back you were like, hey, can't come to D&D today. We're all going on our boat and sailing. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's just something you do too.
Oh, yeah. Wasn't this the same thing with like ice skating? And you were like, what? You just do that?
Yeah, I mean.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a distinctly European thing or if it's just something that, I don't know. I've never just gone sailing for a day. Maybe that's just because I live in a more city-like place.
I mean, that makes sense.
People do.
It's also a little bit a thing like water sports in general, I think, where you just sort of grow up with it and then it's in your system, But if you've never done it in your life, like some people go like horseback riding for just a day for fun. And I'm like, no, I don't understand how that works. But, everybody has their thing, I guess. Oh, well.
Yeah, love that. Yeah. Anyway, I believe this is a world building podcast.
Already on such a tangent.
Yeah. I mean, we could continue talking about like the role of chocolate in world building. I'm sure that
actually my topic now. Next week.
For a quick second, I was like, oh, what a perfect tie-in. All right.
I'm sorry. I shattered the dream.
No, next time. Don't worry. Next time. We'll save it for a rainy day.
Sure.
Absolutely. But yeah, I believe you're going first this week and I'll follow up. What topic do you have today?
Yes. The topic that I brought for this week is something that I think comes back in a lot of things related to world building, but also just sort of gaming and storytelling in general. And it's about language. I want to talk with you about language.
Nice.
Which is, of course, quite broad, to put it mildly.
Mm-hmm.
But I recently rewatched one of my favorite videos from Dale Kingsmill on YouTube.
Yes,
I think, what's her screen name? I think Monarch's Factory. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she did a great video about making witches scary in your RPG game, TTRPG game. And one of the things she mentioned there, which is why I love it so much, why this video spoke to me so much, and I wanted to rewatch it specifically for this topic, is that she talks about the way that witches can make deals with you or can sort of barter, or you can have this sort of super eerie conversation drenched in metaphor, you know what I mean? I remember that she at some point said, what if you can just order a change of mind somewhere? Or you can order a broken promise in a bottle. Like, what does that even mean? I have no clue, but the sort of aspect of language that is so involved in this triggered so much interesting stuff for me. And I think based on this, like how in her example, if my player character or my character can have an interaction with a witch almost like solely based on metaphor, I would say, it's the most fascinating way of using language to me. As also an aspect of magic, if we're talking about more fantasy world building, right?
Sure, yeah.
Or just about creepy social interactions in general, like language is a big deal. Subtext, I can keep talking forever. And I think it's just really interesting. And maybe it's nice to start off, because I'm just curious, if you've ever made your own language for a game or sort of purposefully decided to use a different language, or maybe have someone not understand a certain thing because of language, or if you've not thought about this at all. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. In D&D, let me see. Yeah, I've not just had to check my records real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever made like a unique language. Obviously, that's a lot of time and effort to just craft something
Of course, yeah.
But in D&D, it's very, very common. I do it all the time, where like secrets and mysteries are hidden behind specific languages, and only very specifically, when you create your character, you often get to choose 2 to 3 languages that your character knows right off the bat based on their race, their ancestry, their background, things like that. And some secrets revealed in the world can only be deciphered or interpreted by one specific character, giving them kind of an exclusivity to the secret and how they want to share it with the party. And usually, the older the secret is, I often try to tie it to, well, who's behind this secret, who made this, and what language would they have spoken if they were kind of crafting it. So some lighter, more recent discoveries would be, more common languages like in Elvish, in Orc, in Dwarven, things like that. But the very old, the very mysterious ones are in Deep Speech, Celestial, Abyssal, the ancient extraplanar languages that you might not come across. And that one character that, happened to study, I don't know, demonology or something like that, would have kind of the in onto solving it. And if they can't solve it, then they have to find someone who can. And that leads itself on a different plot line or leads them in a different direction. Like, we need someone who can decipher this angel speech and all that. Languages are so cool. I think that they have a place in any form of media, especially if you want to separate the conversation from the norm. Anything written in a different language is kind of treated as, again, like a heralded secret. It's very specifically something not part of your daily life. Otherwise, it would have already been translated.
I like the way how you said that. That it sort of deviates from the norm depending on how sort of mainstream a language is, I would say. Or how old or how used a language is. Yeah. I think that's interesting in general with con languages. Conlangs, I think, is even like a super big subreddit or something. Like, this is just for interest. You should, if you're into world building or language or both, you should just like lurk on this subreddit for just an afternoon and just see all the crazy shit and beautiful things that people come up with. Because there's language enthusiasts there. They make like systems after systems. It's super fun.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think it's...
I didn't even think of that.
I think it's just a subreddit like r/conlangs, con languages, something like that. Okay. You'll probably find it. But I think the interesting thing about imaginary language is that it's also has a lot to do with culture and with a certain exoticism or like mysticism to it. Like very often, I think you described it perfectly just there. The fact that something is not, readable or understandable is already a sort of code or a sort of hint to a bigger world in general.
Yeah.
Like you barely have to do anything for it, but, say, this is not a language, or it's a bunch of squiggles and you don't know if it's a drawing or if it's language, or if it's runes or if it's, I don't know, numbers for that matter. And I think this sort of sense of culture that emanates from just using different languages is very big and very easily evoked, I guess. Like once you have a bunch of languages, because for instance, I honestly am not very good at using languages in my own D&D game, but D&D has a lot of conlangs, I think. Like, as you were saying, you just mentioned a bunch. Like, those were like, I don't know, 5 or something you mentioned, but they have a lot more. Like, there's so many things out there, and some even also have scripts and stuff. It's pretty crazy. But I think just the fact that there's so many is already sort of a proof of how big this lore of D&D is, And even if you don't know what a language is, like, I know that deep speech is a thing, but aside from the word and the fact that I know it's another language, that's all I know about. But the fact that it exists sort of links to this enormous culture that's behind it that I have no idea about. And maybe even more interesting as a separate topic, maybe almost, like, language is also in D&D, but in fantasy in general, very much related to the magic, not only in the way that I described in the example of Dale Kingsmill's video, but also in just the fact that spellcasting is often verbal. It's a thing that uses words or uses language in order to literally work its magic. The sort of Wingardium Leviosa is one way of doing it, the Harry Potter sort of pseudo-Latin con language, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, where does language end and where does spellcasting begin? Or where does spellcasting begin and where does language end in a sort of practical way? Like hand motions is also a thing. Like that's a language in itself.
That's true. Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be verbal to be a language, perhaps. Yeah, and I think there's so many openings or interesting aspects about language that you can use very beautifully, in creating a world of your own, and will make it like super rich or something.
Absolutely. Languages, I've also noticed, is a fantastic way to kind of tie two very separate things together. As in, like, if they find something written in a language over in the southern half of the continent, and then they find something written in that same language farther up, that's one of the quickest ways for a storyteller to connect two threads or plot points that were previously difficult to. They could be like, hey, I recognize some of these runes. Like, when was the last time I saw this? When was the last time I encountered this? Oh, it was back then. So is that connected to this,
Right.
It's a fantastic like storytelling tool to kind of group specific events together. And yeah. And there's also like, depending on what languages you speak, you can figure out sometimes if someone's like a friend or a foe, depending on how civilizations work and how like different dialects or different languages kind of break apart. And yeah, I do want to touch on the languages equals magic kind of thing, but not right now because my topic kind of reaches into that.
Oh, sure.
So there's a little bit of a connect.
Of course,
there.
Of course.
And of course, like languages are cool. I think if you've ever met like, or just
it's true, yeah.
Have you ever heard of like a polyglot? Like those people are incredible.
Oh,
people who
yeah.
just like take months to a year to just learn a language for the sake of like learning.
Yeah, that's
or
amazing.
interacting with communities like near and far. Like there's a YouTuber that I met once, Shaoma. He's a guy who, looks Caucasian, but he was raised and studied in China. So he's entirely fluent in that and a couple of dialects. So he tours around New York, just kind of going into Chinese communities and surprising them with his knowledge of the language. It's actually just really kind of jarring to see somebody speaking a language that you typically attribute to, people who look like you or talk like you or have lived like you, and then the cultural connection of finding somebody who speaks your language and thusly probably might have the same experiences as you is very exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so opening up to be able to sort of reach someone on their own turf, basically. It reminds me of two things, actually. One is that I think maybe this week even, like, I've been realizing that there's a lot of Turkish people in my neighborhood, or at least that don't really speak Dutch very well, but they're living here, I didn't realize earlier that they were all from a similar community. And I really started getting conscious of the fact that I don't speak their language and that I can't reach them without them having to reach over to me. You know what I mean? Like there's a very wonderful little Turkish bakery in my neighborhood, like right next to a bigger supermarket, like the sort of classic Western supermarket, And I always get my Turkish bread there. But then I'm like, I can't even sort of understand these people's culture because there's no language that I can connect with them about this,
Interesting.
And I was like, I wish if it wasn't like super hard and I had so much more to do, I wish if I could just learn Turkish. And then I would instantly sort of understand this vibe like 10,000 times better than I would be able to now, because I can literally reach them on their own ground, like with their own culture in mind. And of course, I'm not Turkish, so there are still differences. And this is the second thing that I wanted to mention. Like the second thing it reminded me of is a television documentary series that is in Dutch, unfortunately. but that's one of my all-time favorite series ever. And it's basically just a Dutch journalist who has learned Chinese, kind of similarly to the YouTuber you described.
Fantastic.
And does a lot of very long trips to China and just documents his, findings and experience. And he talks to so many locals there. And because, of course, it's, subtitled, but because he speaks their language, you get such different stories because they understand how to reach out to you because you literally have a means of communicating with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it brings up such different experiences, or you can reach into people so much better. And I think that's really a wonderful and super intriguing, interesting thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. The nuance of conversation it truly comes out depending on if the two
well
people
said.
talking can speak the same language. That's something very, very deep and familiar to me because I'm Filipino American, so I grew up in the States and I never formally learned Tagalog, which is the language of the Philippines.
Right.
Even though my parents can speak it, my grandparents can speak it. I recognize that like both my parents can speak English, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that my dad, who sometimes struggles with English, his conversations are just so much more incredibly nuanced with me when he can speak in Tagalog, when he can speak in his native tongue.
Right.
And I can understand a good majority of it, but there's like levels of vocabulary that are locked away from me that he cannot express to me because I don't know it.
Oh,
Like
damn.
I'm not familiar with those words. Like if you ever listen to like an old Filipino prayer, all of those words, like 90% of it, I don't understand because those words never come up in regular conversation. So it's just a blur to me. And it's probably some incredibly like nuanced, detailed prayer that has all of these meaningful words that I'm just not like, I've just never had the opportunity to like dig into and understand. And that comes I notice that most prominently whenever we visit the Philippines. All of my family, of course, they speak Tagalog, but their English is limited. So me speaking English, but my Tagalog is limited, our conversations are like surface level at best because we can't dive into like the nitty gritty of the conversation if we're just trying to get past like formalities. And like I'm there, I try to learn a bit of Tagalog. They try to like practice their English and there's a dynamic going on, but it's never like deeper than surface level. And that's the magic of like learning a language or being a polyglot to kind of get into the depths of conversation and really understand what's trying to be being conveyed. There's a whole level of detail that is lost,
Yeah, I agree. It's very funny. I mean, it was a while ago, but I talked to my mom about the fact that I'm quite versed in English and she is, she can understand English, she can listen to it. But we had a talk about how she doesn't really like English podcasts, which is a shame. Because
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, side note, that's going to be a bummer. So I'm not sure if she'll finish, listening to this, which is fine. But she's like, I understand it, and I feel like there's not a lot that I'm missing, but it still tires me out so much that I just prefer Dutch because it's more a passive experience to me. It's literally like more natural, and that's logical, of course. But I have to say, I can't really imagine what it must feel like to not have that sort of deeper connection in terms of language with the people that you're so close to.
Mm-hmm.
You have good conversations and you've lived with each other for forever, Yeah, but there's a little bit of depth there that's probably going missing then, the way you describe it. I don't know.
Yeah, of course.
Feels like it must be hard sometimes if you have a complicated thing you need to discuss or...
Yeah, I mean, my parents have been living here in America for like 30 years. So like by all means, like
that helps,
they can hold like solid conversations.
Yeah, of course.
And they're pretty darn solid in English. I guess it's like a uniquely American problem to only know one language. In other countries, like y'all are know 2 or 3 or 4 languages just like off the bat because that's just a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Here in America, they're like, hey, here's a language you can learn in middle school, but like you don't really need it. No, it might help.
Sure. Yeah.
It just, I don't know. It's I've made a couple of attempts to learn Tagalog. Like I've downloaded a bunch of audiobooks and lectures and all that, but it's always like there's a bit of a divide between the educational process, the formality of learning a language, and being able to use it in casual conversation.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I think for the record, it's also, I guess, more logical or something because Europe is a lot of small countries and there's a lot of sort of in-between traveling going on. Unlike America, where, between states or between maybe Canada and America, there's still similar language going on. We all speak different languages, and a lot of countries have similar languages. French and Italian, or Italian and Spanish is all related. You know what I mean? So if you know a word in French and it sounds a little bit like the word in Italian, I don't know either, but you know what I mean? You can kind of make your way through it.
Yeah.
But there's also a sort of quote unquote necessity, I guess, is maybe more present here for at least knowing like something beyond your native tongue.
Of course. That's a whole another thing entirely, like the proximity of languages. Even in D&D, there are like, I believe Goblin, Orc, and Dwarvish all use the same like lettering script.
Oh, right.
So even if you don't know one of the 2 or the 3 languages, you can kind of decipher what it is if it's written down.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. Yeah, I mean, languages are just so important to. I feel like almost necessary in almost in most settings. Unless you're like, the more modern you go, I guess the less relevant it becomes. But if you're trying to tackle like a medieval fantasy or a historical fiction,
I mean, it's interesting that you say that also about the more modern the setting is, the less it's maybe necessary, because it's also a lot about how international something is, right? Like the fact that D&D has a language called Common, the sort of common language, the sort of trade language, I guess.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of trade, or if the internet exists, there's only English, and then you kind of can get by. You know what I mean? There's only Common, I guess, the sort of intermediary international language, and then you're kind of fine. Or the more global something gets, you know? So it also says a lot about your setting if it has a lot of languages versus if it has maybe a very big common language, and that's it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that points to something being more modern, or sometimes it points to something having a very present trading culture, perhaps, or...
Of course.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, wasn't that like the plot of Atlantis, where like the main character was the only one who could read a certain language? So that's why he was kind of taken along?
I have no idea, but it sounds cool. Do you mean the movie or like the myth
the movie
of Atlantis in general? Oh, I think I've watched it like forever ago. Okay.
Yeah,
now I feel
it's like 20-something years old.
Bad about myself, yeah. Okay.
But yeah, just someone being able to decipher a language is a fantastic trait.
It's a
to
superpower.
Kick off an adventure story.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Something entirely unique.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also in like One Piece, the anime, there's like a character that is one of the only few in the world who can read like an ancient language that unlocks a super powerful power. And like, because of that, people are fighting for them in particular, like the person, like trying to take the person because of their talent.
Got it. Yeah. I do remember I really liked this movie, but I forgot everything about it. And also because like Disney is not proud of it, I feel. Or I don't even know if it was Disney, DreamWorks. I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure it was Disney. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, shame. Just like the one with, what's the other one? Treasure Island, I think. That one was also really good, and nobody talks about it. It's a shame. Oh well. More tangents. Anyway, that's all I got, but yeah.
Okay, so my topic for this week very much leans into exactly what we were just talking about. We did discuss this.
Keeping up the tradition.
We did discuss this. Either we're like super like in sync with each other, or we're just like 2 different parts.
There's no in between.
Today it links right in. We can talk about.
Sweet.
We talked about it definitely in one of our prompts, but I want to talk about it in more detail because it is a topic that we probably can't cover in a single episode, and that is magic. The importance of magic in a setting and the uses of magic in a setting,
general,
what that means.
Okay.
Magic in general. We're just going to open that up.
Sure.
Open that can of worms and pull it apart in multiple episodes following this.
I don't like the metaphor of worms and pulling it apart, but yes.
Okay, so magic, a distinctly fictional tool used in basically the presence of magic dictates its fictionality, but magic in general is not necessarily a fictional topic. It's something brought up all the time in older cultures. Magic has very heavy roots in ancient civilizations as the explanation for supernatural events, whether it be like the weather, like we talked about, or things disappearing, or the wonders that we eventually attribute to science has all been labeled as magic at one point or another. Even nowadays, when things are like super crazy in the chemist's room, people are like, oh, well, that's magic. That's crazy how that works. And while things in reality are often deciphered by such things or attributed to some sort of religion, in fictional forms of media, it has a very specific home. And magic covers a whole lot of things. It's a huge umbrella. And I want to kind of talk about magic at its essence, like not necessarily a very specific kind of magic or how it's presented in very specific kinds of media, although we can touch on that. I kind of want to explain like, what is magic's role and how is it utilized in the art of storytelling? So again, I'm a huge fan of the YouTube series Overly Sarcastic Productions and the series they create called Trope Talks, where they discuss the various similarities in literary media. but specifically magic that they touched upon. There's an episode entirely on that, which is wonderful. They kind of split magic into two things: how it's presented and how it works.
Okay.
Let me go into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
So we'll go with how it's presented. Magic often appears in 5 specific brands. There's potions, there's enchantments or curses, there's prophecies, there's magical items, and there's spells. So that's kind of the general list of how magic shows up in storytelling.
Okay.
There's a fantastic point about potions, where potions has roots in reality as medicine. Magic often presents itself as in sort of like a concoction, something somebody's made, very similar to how medicine could not be explained how it works, but it certainly works, attributed to some supernatural forces.
Right.
Things like enchantments and curses has its place in like witches' tales, in folklore, in fairy magic, things happening to people, lycanthropy, vampirism, all of that. That's also magic. You look into like prophecies. Prophecies are divination, talents of seeing the future, dreams, like we covered. I'm noticing that as I continue talking about this, we're kind of reaching into topics we've talked about in past weeks.
I mean, it's pretty linked anyway. Yeah, makes sense.
Of course. Yeah. Magical items are like MacGuffins, things of ancient stories, empowering individuals who wield it. And of course, spells are spells. Wave your hand, Harry Potter, things happen.
Yeah.
So the question that I have to kind of focus on as I present that is, how do you utilize magic in a story without it solving everything? Because magic in theory is limitless. It can do anything. It's a truly fantastical concept. So there are a number of ways that magic is kind of reined in different works, different media. But I want to ask you, in your experience, have you utilized magic, and to what capacity do you find yourself containing it and making it a part of the story?
Yeah, this is super interesting. And I think one of both the most important thing and maybe the hardest thing about magic in storytelling or in world building, I would say I've used magic in different ways anyway. Like there's the sort of classic, you have magic abilities and you can cast spells, or you can wave your hand and fire shoots out of your fingertips, right?
Yeah.
Which is cool. And, why many people do this all the time in their storytelling. Why, D&D is a system that's based in literally every fantasy novel ever.
Of course.
Which I think, it's very important that it's also just very cool, because people want to have it. If it's done right, people want to be able to do it too. And I have woven a pencil around and said Wingardium Leviosa in my living room, People have done this, and this is the magic, I guess, of magic building. But it reminds me of two things. One is a video by Hello Future Me, who does a lot of Avatar-related video essays. Really fun content. And I think he did one video about hard magic systems versus soft magic systems.
Right.
I won't go maybe too much into that entire thing, but he had a sort of, I guess, sentence in that video that he said all the time to explain, and he said, wizards did it. So he was like, why did this dragon attack the city? Or how did we fix the weird sinkhole portal that emerged in, I don't know, dark underground cave? Oh, wizards did it. End of story. You know what I mean? It's sort of the argument for why magic happens, I guess, or why there's a storm or whatever. And I think that's also what you're talking about. Do you want something to be logically explained or understood? Or do you want the sort of evocative magic tingles of magic in the air and wizards that did it, and that's it, that's all you need? There's a sort of scale on there. Like you can either go super, I guess, soft. I think then we are talking about hard magic versus soft magic.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So I think soft magic systems are basically wizards did it. So there's like magic and it feels mystical and beautiful and interesting and you want to own it. And everyone can just do certain things because wizards can do it. End of story. And then the complete other side of that scale is then hard magic, where everything is super restrained and you exactly know how it works. It's based on maybe one bit of fantasy and then everything else is sort of logically wrapped around it. And I think we can see this more in Avatar, where it's like, okay, people can all bend one element, there's 4 elements, and it works like martial arts. And that's all you kind of need for the rest of the story to sort of evolve around it.
Yeah. Like the bending that happens in Avatar, although they don't call it magic, it's essentially the magic of the world.
Yeah.
Exactly what you said. Yeah. It is specifically limited. It's uniquely, this is what you can do. This is what is possible. Some people are stronger at doing this thing. Some people are not. And instead of being like, oh, I summon an owl next to me, that's not possible in the bending world.
Yeah.
So the creativity falls upon the people wielding it to use it in various ways to make it solve problems. Like, how many different ways can you use water to get you out of certain situations? Like, how can it get you out of prison? How can it like move your boat? How can it keep you safe? It leans on the creativity of the caster, which is a fantastic way to limit its influence on the world. Also, like you said, this is kind of leaning into like a Full Metal Alchemist more style of magic, where there's rules. There are specific limitations to magic. It can do this, it can't do this. But within that sphere of what it can do, people have taken time and years to break it down and study it and improve upon it. So people who can cast magic are specifically those who have dedicated years of their life to understanding it. And not respecting those rules, not understanding them fully, has those grave consequences that prevent people from changing the world on a whim,
Yeah. I think for me, I also really like the idea of it being a system, like the specific word that's used when you call it a magic system. I have to say my preference usually lies in the more limited, I guess, logic or knowledge-based magic, because I can link to it more, or I can appreciate it more when then characters are creative with, waterbending, to name the same example. Than just, magic sparks from your fingertips and it just looks cool and that's it. Very often I appreciate it more if it feels more like a muscle that's being trained, or a skill that's being learned, or a language that's being learned, for that matter. But I have to say there's one time I also, for one of my own stories, used a very, very soft magic system. I don't even know if I want to call it system, which was completely the other side of that. In that story where I wanted to use that specific way of soft magic, I used this as more of like an oracle. There was this sort of mist around one sort of abandoned house where my main characters lived in. And this mist was almost tangible and would form certain shapes, or would sort of entangle people, or would create Fata Morgana kind of hallucinations at times. And it was very sort of vague and evocative, and that's it. But the purpose for that kind of magic was very different from the purpose that I would use in an Avatar magic system. And the purpose for the sort of vague, evocative, misty magic was to work as a sort of oracle, or a sort of expression of the emotions of the main character. At some point in the story, my main character, who was a young girl who didn't talk, was super angry. She would run out and get away from the house and all its, inhabitants that angered her. And then this mist would sort of make her run faster and make her veins pop, and would make colors that were like super dark and piercing to her eyes,
Gotcha.
And because she couldn't talk, or she didn't want to talk, I'm not sure if I ever decided on either of those. But this was sort of a very purposeful way of expressing her emotions without having to say it.
Right.
And if other characters would walk into that mist, the mist would change, or suddenly the distance between the main character and that other character would be confusing, or would be not sure if they were far away or close, or, it worked very mysteriously.
That's awesome.
So there's also ways that soft magic is really cool, I guess. I mean, I really still love that idea from that story that I did. But then it really is important that you think of or decide early on what the purpose for that system is that you're creating, or why we need this system in this world to be there,
Yeah.
Magic is not always the answer. Of course, there is, the way I watch Winx Club, where it's like, yes, fuck yes, glitter, fairies, beautifulness, let's go. That's all I need, right? And then it's just, magic's fucking cool, that's it. That's all we got, done.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's a very thing where you want to, in an academia setting, of course it has this sort of purpose of learning and growing a character, or making them more powerful as time goes on, or working with the academia setting that you want your story to take place in, etc., right? So it really depends on the story also where you want to go with that magic.
Yeah. You touched on two really, really great things there that I wanted to kind of bounce back to. One of the really great things about magic is that there's a mystique to it, right? That it's not fully understood.
Yeah.
That there's still more and more to learn about it. And on any given day, in any given situation, you might just lose control. You know, it's not something that you truly possess with a firm iron grasp.
Yeah.
Part of the exciting thing about magic is that there is that sense of mystery and surprise that remains regardless of how well you know it, right? And also what you mentioned is that sometimes in many settings, magic is a rare talent. It's kind of a gift or a blessing or something that people, very specific people, uniquely have. And because of that, there's a responsibility to using it. There's a kind of a necessity to using it responsibly because you have something that separates you from everybody else and therefore are held to a higher level of attention or regard.
Accountability, I guess. Yeah.
Accountability. That's the word. Right. And how people reconcile that, they're like, I could make everything explode in a 5-mile radius, but I won't because that's not how magic should be used. You know, there's a morality attached to it suddenly.
Interesting. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just, and of course, there's the scenario where magic is like a divine blessing. It's given to you, based on a patron or a god. And if you're given to it, there are rules to using it, you know, like you can do all of this stuff, but don't make food with it, you know, something crazy like that.
Don't anger the god that gave this to you. Yeah.
Yeah, like don't use it to hurt, blah blah blah, or don't never mind like some rules, like, you know, the like in Harry Potter, there are the forbidden curses where like
the death
use your magic to do don't use your magic to kill, torture, or mind control or something like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So like those are the limitations we put on magic so it doesn't completely ruin our world setting, you know, so that we can kind of rein it in and make sure it is still an active player in the story, but not the sole driver, I guess.
Yeah,
would be the explanation. Sure.
That reminds me of one more thing that is interesting as an example, I think, because it's in the middle of both hard magic and soft magic. And it's the example that I got from She-Ra and maybe also from Zelda a little bit. But She-Ra and the Princesses of Power is a super fun animated series on Netflix, I think. And at some point, tiny spoiler, well, a little bit of a spoiler. So if you want to watch it, stop it now.
I've watched the first half of the first season, so I've kind of been spoiled on the ending though. So it's fine.
Okay. I'm trying to think if this is already in that half. Well, okay.
Listen,
I won't say too much about it.
If you're listening, if you're a listener and you don't want to be spoiled on She-Ra, just skip ahead like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
We'll be done with it. No, don't stop. We still have good things.
Okay. But in She-Ra, there's this finding, I guess, archaeological finding, I would almost say, of a sort of ancient culture that a lot of the nature and forest and stuff is built upon, like a sort of civilization that gone, how do you say that? Like,
it's been lost to
time?
Died?
Yeah, lost to time, I guess. And there's a lot of ancient technology linked to that, where a lot of the magic for example, She-Ra's sword comes from. And then with that idea or with that way of magic building, there's a sort of weird combination going on between, one, the super logical feel of a technology-based magic, which is very logical in my opinion, or at least the way we read about it in fantasy and stuff, you know? And then on the other hand, the fact that it's an ancient civilization or an ancient piece of technology or of magic that is very hard to understand and barely readable, and only, as you were saying, like the example in Atlantis, like only one person can read it and suddenly, you know, they have all this power because there's so little known about it. And there's a little bit of both there, because there is so little known about it. It also, again, gains this mysticism and vagueness that usually soft magic systems have. And I think that's also a really interesting balance. Like, there can be a bit of both if you play it a certain way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Just magic, as we've kind of realized here, is an incredibly broad topic. We can definitely kind of split this up into future episodes.
Sure.
Maybe target one at a time. But I just kind of wanted to touch on the fact that like magic is just an incredible tool to use in your fantasy world building, as long as you know how to kind of put walls around it and figure out how it's supposed to factor into daily life and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah. Great topic.
We could this is just one of many topics that we could talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could talk for another hour on this, but we won't because we should probably close this out before it gets too long.
Yeah.
I'm going to toss it to you. I believe we're stepping into our world building prompt section to kind of wrap up the podcast.
Yes. Yeah, I brought a prompt for this week. We're switching it off nicely. And I guess maintaining the tradition that we started like 2 episodes ago. Yeah, sure. I just want you to build me a city. And there's one word, one little word that I want you to keep in mind.
Caught me off guard with just build your city.
You can do it. I believe in you.
Sure. Hit me with the word. Let's go.
And I want you to build me a city or a village or, a place that is temporary. And you can completely decide how or why. Yeah. End of sentence.
Temporary. Gosh. Okay, sure. Give me a second with this.
Sure. Time to think.
Yeah, there's like a couple of ways I can approach this. I'm trying to pick like the best way I want to do it.
Like, what are you thinking? That's also interesting.
So I'm thinking, the biggest question is why? Why is it temporary? And what is the goal of it being temporary? So yeah, let's do this. Let's do this. There is or was a massive city, a great collection of people that kind of used to live in the northern regions of this continent. Their city was, of course, once illustrious and thriving, and progress was made at an alarming pace. But such progress often brings about attention. It wasn't until the city was heavily raided by a very calculating and numerous enemy that the residents of the city had no choice but to evacuate. The very grounds of their city were compromised, the air contaminated, an affliction upon the city that was impossible to reconcile in a way that would leave the citizens healthy. The best way that they could survive as a people was to migrate, and that required traveling south. They had a place that their ancestors used to live in the warmer regions of the world, where a bunch of them had of course their lineage is traced from this. Previous explorers who arrived in this northern space found it to be prosperous and flourishing and decided to establish a city here. But in hearing rumors of a safe haven for themselves, a previous paradise that their ancestors came from, they sought that out. So they traveled south.
Right.
Their goal was eventually to get all of these people in a place where they could rebuild, avoid the people who have strangled their city. It would be a long and arduous journey, probably over the course of years of travel, just to migrate this great amount of people. And the world wouldn't sit still. Obviously, there would be tribes and civilizations that would notice their vulnerability and try to target them. Somewhere along the way, traveling south, there's a schism. The people of the nation feel, about half of them feel like they should return to their northern city. They should try to fight for their land, just reclaim it from the people who have invaded them. And the other half don't believe that they have the power to do so, and that their only sense of salvation comes from arriving in the south. Thus, there is a hefty divide in the community where 50% of them want to head north and 50% of them want to head south. And there's a small subset of people in the center of it all who just want to save as many lives as they can. So in this disparity, in this conflict where people are breaking off, people are leaving, and the travel obviously is not safe with all of them splitting up, a small number of them in the middle of their journey decide to settle, decide to plant their roots exactly where they stand, and kind of create some sort of bastion, a barrier where they can talk about this more freely, spend more time thinking about exactly what they want to do with their future civilization.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, a temporary setup. This is not something that will last forever. Once they decide or break a majority on where they should go, then they will kind of take apart their town, their small village, and make their way there. But due to unforeseen circumstances, due to incredible conflicts and schisms, where the community essentially fractures, nobody feels safe continuing to the south or continuing to the north. They feel like they've lost too much manpower. They've lost too many people. And as more time passes, they start to feel more comfortable in this temporary city. They start to say, well, this is good enough, right? We don't need paradise and we don't need war. The ground is quiet. The mountain is protected against the winds. And some people are already starting to have a family. They can't travel anymore. My family's getting older. My grandparents are injured. Going north and going south is not a reasonable quest for me anymore. So I'm going to live here in the city that we labeled temporary. Perhaps right here is exactly where we need to be. And that's the temporary city.
Oh, dang. That was
Something
real
like
good. Man, I
Something
thought you
along those lines.
would go like a total different direction, but I love it.
Okay.
Interesting. Ooh.
What direction were you leaning? What was your
Oh, well,
what was
I
your
thought
pitch?
maybe because they were like driven off their homeland, maybe it would be a sort of nomadic thing where they sort of would travel around forever. But I like that you sort of ended it with it not being a temporary city in the end, or like being consciously a city now instead of sort of, that it started off as okay, we'll be here for a sec, but then we'll move on. And that it sort of literally started to, I don't know, grow roots.
Yeah, I think that the concept of just
Really
kind of
nice. Yeah.
yeah, like sitting down, like it's a kind of the theme of complacency. It's like there are two great things you could strive for. You could go into great conflict, reclaim the north, or you could seek paradise in the south. But reality often speaks louder than ideals.
Yeah, for
and it's
sure.
just like this,
Yeah.
for a lot of people, would be like, this is good enough. This will do, and it's not the most heroic fantasy ending, but
No, but
I
it's
think
very good.
pretty rooted.
It also reminded me of the Prince of Egypt movie. Have you seen it?
Right.
These vibes were so similar, and I loved it. It's a really good movie. Talking about movies that are underappreciated, by the way. And there's also a really good like Dutch children's book. I think it has an English version. I'm not sure. Like historical fiction about a sort of children's crusade that's slowly going south in Europe. And then at some point they're like, why are we even going here?
Right.
The travel is sort of the most interesting part about the book. You know what I mean? It's kind of like this. Yeah, it's really great. Dang, so fun. I love it.
Good stuff. All right. I think that is a great way to kind of wrap up our podcast for today.
Yeah.
Thank you all for tuning in. This was definitely a fun episode.
This was a long one, I feel. Yeah.
Huge topics. Yeah.
No
that we'll
pressure and
probably
stuff.
break down in the future. But until then, until we kind of revisit these topics again, have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening all this way. I hope you guys have a great week, great month, great year. And really kind of ponder on I guess our intent is like anyone can do this kind of stuff. Anyone can world build. And we kind of want to encourage that with this sort of podcast.
Yes, for sure.
So, spend a minute or two thinking about these things. But of course, as you do, always remember, your rivers are wrong.
Yep.
Y'all have a great one.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Your Rivers Are Wrong. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes that you'd like to hear us cover, feel free to contact us at yourriversarewrong@gmail.com. Our intro and outro music is written by Maarten Schellekens. Thanks for that. And again, thank you so much for listening. We hope to see you at the next one.